Reports of more high-level defections from North Korea continue to surface, along with news that Pyongyang conducted yet another intermediate-range ballistic missile test. Presidents Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin hold talks once again. We look at tightening ties between China and Russia. Samsung Electronics in the end decides to kill off its latest Note 7 phablet, despite initial efforts to relaunch the troubled smartphone. What does this mean for Samsung? All this right ahead. Welcome to News Inside. I'm An Jang-hyun. Let's meet our panelists. Professor Shin Sang-hyuk from Kyung University Graduate School of International Studies is with us. And Dr. Pong Young-sik from Yonsei University Institute for North Korean Studies is back with us as well. North Korea test-fired another Musudan mid-range ballistic missile on the 15th, which is believed to have failed as it exploded shortly after launch. With a growing sense of unpredictability hanging over Pyongyang's future actions, we'll take a look at some of the main issues at stake.
North Korea started last week off marking its Party Foundation Day, but later test-fired another Musudan intermediate-range missile. The following day, Seoul issued a statement condemning the act.
국제사회의 대북 제재 압박 의지를 더욱 강화시키고 북한의 국제적 고립과 경제적 어려움을 가일층 심화시킬 뿐이라는 점을 북한은 분명히 깨달아야 할 것이다.
The North has continually been pursuing the development of its intermediate-range ballistic missile, with the first 4 exploding immediately after launch. The 5th flew roughly 150 kilometers before exploding, while the 6th is the only one that flew an estimated 400 kilometers and is considered a success. Countless efforts have been poured into the Musudan missile, which has a maximum range of 4,000 kilometers, placing the U.S. military base in Guam within its potential reach. It can also be mounted on a mobile launching pad and carry a nuclear warhead. What's different about the latest attempt is that it was launched from an inland area in the northern region to alter its range. What do these provocations all mean for stability on the Korean peninsula?
A provocation was widely expected on the Workers' Party Foundation Day, but the North waited a few more days to test-fire this missile. Since it was a failure, though, do you think there will be another missile test in the near future?
I think so. In the near future, North Korean government has tried to show their nuclear capacity to the United States and to Korea and to the world, because there will be a presidential election in the United States. And also in Korea, there have been some confusion because of the South Koreans' the government policy towards Charter of Human Rights in North Korea. So I think considering all of this, definitely they have enough reasons to conduct another provocative actions.
Some actually say that this increased activity by North Korea is with the United States in mind.
Definitely. The ultimate negotiation partner in the mind of Kim Jong-un should be the United States, basically repeating the 1994 agreed framework. That is why Kim Jong-un regime seems to be in a hurry, testing so many different types of missiles, sometimes in alignment with the political calendar, but other times just almost a random tests. So it seems like Kim Jong-un is in a hurry to end up putting additional pressure on the scientists and government officials to successfully achieve the diversification and the further sophistication of ICBMs, not only Musudan missile but also Nodong, which is most likely to carry a nuclear warhead less than 1 kilotons. So although the official policy of Kim Jong-un regime is 병진 policy, which can be translated as a simultaneous pursuit of both nuclear development and economic development, it seems like Kim Jong-un is putting all eggs in one basket, which is achieving the second strike nuclear capability with the long-range missiles to be able to target not just South Korea but mainland Japan and the U.S. forces in Guam and perhaps in Hawaii and the western part of the United States. Then Kim Jong-un believes that it will be able to negotiate in a favorite terms with the United States for getting the economic assistance and diplomatic normalization, which will be a crucial element for long-term economic development.
And it looks like North Korea is planning to conduct 2 more nuclear tests, according to what former North Korean Deputy Ambassador to the UK, Tae Yong-ho, told Seoul's intelligence authorities. Maybe some of that has to do with the presidential election that's going to come up next year?
Of course. I think, the North Korea will have used the nuclear card, so-called, for the relationship with the United States. But certainly, very recently, the North Korean government tried to use the nuclear card as a way to give some impact on the South Korean politics. Well, as I said before, there will be the presidential election next year. And very recently, President Park Geun-hye gave a comment to related authorities to improve the capacity for the settlement of North Korean defectors. Well, it can be a kind of threat against North Korean the regime. So definitely, North Korea has enough reason to use the nuclear threats to give some impact on the South Korean politics.
Yes, so we've seen a string of defections by elite North Koreans recently, possibly as a result of Kim Jong-un's so-called reign of terror. And this is all despite Pyongyang's efforts to seal off its borders.
But we have to really be really careful to read the actual implications of so-called reign of terror by Kim Jong-un regime. It is true that the number of defectors who came to the south has slightly increased, almost by 15.6% compared to the same time last year. And this is a new trend because since 2011, when Kim Jong-un emerged as the absolute leader, the number of defectors has been on decline. So this is the first time it is upswing. But the reign of terror should be qualified, whether that it is a clear indication of the weakness or irrationality of Kim Jong-un leadership. One, every new leader wants to pour new wine in the new wineskin. So although the reign of terror resulted in purge of all the 7 highest ranked members who carried the casket of his father, Kim Jong-il, in the formal funeral, but it is only natural of any new leaders to organize the core cabinet members with somebody new and somebody who are not really tied to the older leadership. So the elimination of the old guards should not be only viewed as an irrational action by Kim Jong-un. And the second point is whether we have accurate information about the defections. Yes, Deputy Ambassador Tae Yong-un defected from UK, but the Korean media widely reported that his boss, Vice Minister Kung Seok-gung, who has been in charge of North Korean diplomacy toward Europe, had been purged. But we only a few days ago witnessed him, enjoying honorary retirement and receiving foreign guests, enjoying watching sports events in Pyongyang. So the reign of terror and the purge of the government officials because of the defections of the high-ranked officials, we need to see more concrete evidence.
Should be taken with a grain of salt.
Right, grain of salt. The Michael Madden, the researcher of North Korean Leadership Watch, said that Tae Yong-ho was a member of the outer elite, not the in crowd. So if we are going to see the connection between high-ranked officials' defections and the Kim Jong-un regime increasingly in crisis mode, then we have to see the defection of members of the in crowd.
Well, what is clear is that the number of North Korean defectors is on the rise, and that number is expected to surpass 30,000 next month. President Park Geun-hye has openly called on North Korean residents to seek a new life in the South, while emphasizing the need for larger facilities to take in defectors. Well, here's what some say should be done to better accommodate those escaping to the South.
북한 주민 여러분들이 희망과 삶을 찾도록 길을 열어 놓을 것입니다. 탈북민 정착을 위한 제도를 재점검하고 자유와 인권을 찾아 올 북한 주민들을 충분히 수용할 수 있는 체계와 역량을 조속히 갖춰 나가기를 바랍니다.
Following an open message calling on North Korean residents to defect in a speech on Armed Forces Day, President Park Geun-hye has emphasized the importance of readiness within the South. So then, what kind of support do North Korean defectors need? In a survey of those now living in the South, they said the most important is receiving help for employment.
현재 이제 정착해서 보면은 탈북민들이 20, 30대는 다 대학에 보내주니까 이것은 뭐 큰 혜택이고 다 보람을 느끼지만 40대, 50대, 60대가 이게 중간층이 취업이 거의 되질 않습니다.
On top of this, the need for a long-term vision is also much required, since the number of defectors will only continue to rise.
Well, defecting is one thing, but resettling is a whole new issue that requires a lot of preparation on this end, especially when we have reunification in mind. What are some things that could be done?
Well, in fact, the first thing we have to concern about is the bias against the North Korean defectors. Out of the North Korean defectors, many of them are complaining about such a kind of the existing social bias against them. So the Korean government should have to launch nationwide campaign to change such a kind of social bias against North Korean defectors. Of course, it will take a time, but we have to change it. Second one is, in fact, the basic law for the North Korean defectors in South Korea has been the Act on the Protection and Settlement Support of Residents escaped from North Korea since 1997. According to this law, the Korean government has provided the various services to North Korean defectors. But when you look at the services provided by the Korean government to the North Korean defectors, there must be something to be changed or to be improved. First of all, South Korean government has provided the various vocational training to North Korean defectors, but considering that North Korean defectors came from various the social status in North Korea, so more tailor-made the vocational training program should be developed and should be provided to the North Korean defectors. Depending on their backgrounds, social status, and educational background, we have to develop the more well-prepared the social settlement programs to the North Korean defectors.
Well, we can probably expect this trend of defections to continue, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can expect the demise or the collapse of the North Korean regime, does it?
Right. We have to be really careful to establish the correlation between increasing number of defectors, especially new trend is that we see more and more male defectors from North Korea. And its relations with the demise of the Kim Jong-il regime. Because from the financial standpoint, defections have become very important part of North Korean residents left inside North Korea to make living and maintain basic prosperity and living standard. Because in the 1960s, the main channel of foreign remittance came from Japan, which was called the Mountain Fuji funnel of foreign currency. So those are North Korean, people or North Korean Japanese people send money to North Korea. Now North Korean defectors who are now settled inside South Korea sending money has been called as a Mountain Halla funnel of remittances. So from that financial perspective, then we may expect more and more North Korean defectors, not because of their distrust of the political leadership, but purely for personal reasons to support their families.
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin held summit talks this past weekend, with some of their discussions centered around the Korean Peninsula. What ideas were exchanged and what's the significance behind it all? Take a look.
At the 8th BRICS summit last week, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin held summit talks. With this, the two leaders have met 19 times since President Xi took office in March of 2013. Beijing and Moscow have recently enjoyed the warming of ties, even conducting large-scale joint naval exercises in the South China Sea last month. Enhanced cooperation is seen not only in defense and national security, but also in economic exchanges and cooperation on multiple global issues. Facing sanctions from the West, Russia appears to be increasingly turning to China as the two countries look for ways to pursue common interests in the global community.
Regarding the Korean Peninsula, I imagine the two leaders talked about what we always talk about,
Yes.
THAAD, North Korea, and so on.
Well, very recently, last 15th, two leaders met each other. They met. And after the meeting, there was official announcement. They discussed about how to promote peace on the Korean Peninsula, but they denied to give more details about their talks. But we can easily guess what kind of talks they had. Well, considering the situations facing two countries, there are some common grounds which shared by two governments about the deployment of THAAD on the Korean Peninsula and the economic sanctions against North Korea. Definitely. As you know very well, Russia and China have been against deployment of the THAAD on the Korean Peninsula, so they must discuss about how they're going to deal with this issue. And about the economic sanctions, against North Korea, definitely after the fifth nuclear test, the global community are discussing on the further economic sanctions against North Korea. But as you know very well, the Russian government and Chinese government had a different stance about this issue. About further economic sanctions against North Korea. They said, well, we have to prepare the basic the supply to the North Korean people. Definitely, there must be something to be discussed further between two governments. So we can say that they must discuss about the deployment of THAAD as well as the further economic sanctions against North Korea.
Do you think it's fair to say that Seoul's THAAD deployment decision is what triggered this warming of ties between Beijing and Moscow?
Surely it is one of the triggers and one of the most immediate triggers that keeps China and Russia closer. Think about it, meeting 19 times for the past 5 years. So these two leaders must have a lot to talk about on the table, and THAAD deployment in South Korea must be one of the issues they discuss. But we have to put this in a broader perspective from the standpoint of so-called security dilemma. That's a jargon in international security, which means that your own effort to increase your defensive capability, just the innocent, benign intention, may be perceived by other countries as an increased threat to their own survival and national security. So it's a kind of action-reaction spiral situation. So the closer security partnership between first the US and Japan, which was epitomized by Abe's big state visit to Washington in June. We remember that he made a speech in the joint session of the Congress for the first time as a Japanese prime minister, was another trigger for China and Russia to keep their security partnership closer in reactions to the increased security cooperation between Washington and Tokyo. So it's a spiral, kind of a race based upon the security dilemma. And THAAD was one of the immediate triggers.
It almost looks as if China and Russia want the entire world to know how close they are.
They are in a same position, situation to some degree. Let's look at the situation in the Pacific Rim, the region. As you know well, the USA just tried to maintain its hegemony power in the region, while the Chinese government is struggling to take the initiatives in the region. So there must be some competitive structure, existing competitive structure in the region. How about Russia? Russia has been in difficult situation because of the Ukrainian situation. And the NATO and European countries work together to push Russia in a corner in some sense. In such a kind of the structural competition, definitely Russia and China have enough reasons to work together. And one thing more, definitely by strengthening the cooperative relations between these two countries, definitely they think they can take the more advantageous position in the future. Well, in the middle of economic difficulties, global economic difficulties, each country try to they recover from damages caused by the worldwide economic difficulties. So in this context, as a way to overcome the economic challenges as well, they want to work together.
As for Russia, many are concerned about the recent steps it's taken regarding its nuclear program. Earlier this month, it suspended a plutonium agreement with the U.S. along with a nuclear energy research pact.
Right. Your question regards the Putin's announcement that Russia will not respect the PMDA signed with the United States,
Right.
the 2000 Plutonium Management and Disposition Agreement, supposedly eliminating extra weapon-grade plutonium, about 34 tons in each country. So 68 tons would have been enough to produce 17,000 nuclear warheads. So Putin is trying to use this as a leverage to put pressure on the Obama administration to think twice about the advanced deployment of the missiles in Romania and Poland as a part of the overall construction of the MD system in the European continent, missile defense system, and the expansion of NATO by deploying about 4,000 ground forces in Poland and 3 Baltic nations. So again, it's an action-reaction dynamics in international security between Russia and the United States. Russia does not have a strong, reliable security partner except for China, since its diplomatic isolation in the aftermath of 2014 Ukraine crisis. It has been excluded from the G8. So nuclear option must be one of the most effective and affordable option for Putin government. Because of the international isolation since 2014 and the decline of the oil prices in the international market, Putin is situated in a rock and hard place. He wants to keep on increasing the national defense budget to match the United States advancement from two sides, from Western Europe and from Asia Pacific, in the name of rebalancing strategy toward the Asia Pacific. But the economic situation conditions does not allow the Russian government to increase the defense spending. So twisting this nuclear agreement seems to be the hard thought choice for Putin government to cope with the United States.
What about their relations with North Korea? Have we seen any noticeable changes from either China or Russia?
Well, in the past, the relationship between North Korea and China and North Korea and Russia were quite stronger than it is. Well, at the time, when we South Korean government officials discuss about the human rights issues or nuclear crisis, something like that, well, China and Russia took the North Korean side. But very recently, from the meetings with the senior government officials of Chinese government and Russian government, even they discuss about the something bad against North Korean, the government and North Korean policies. But one thing which I want to say is that still we cannot say that there must be some basic changes in their policies towards North Korea. They right now just try to take a middle in some sense, but we can say they are rather closer to North Korean side than South Korea. But in the future, one thing we have to concern about, think more is that maybe there must be a high possibility that take more the pragmatic, diplomatic stance. That means that they will seek for the economic benefits rather than political gains. Considering the globalized economic crisis, definitely this kind of argument can be more acceptable. They will put more priorities on the more pragmatic, more economic the factors rather than the political reasons.
Well, Professor Shin's comment reminds me of the newly announced economic joint developmental plan in Najin Hassan area by Russia and China, including North Korea, because the Najin Hassan project is not subjected to the UN Security Council Resolution 2270. And one additional interesting development is Russia agree with the Abe administration of Japan about the potential joint economic development as a part of their joint effort to settle the so-called Northern Territories problem in exchange for Japan making 600 billion yens as a developmental fund in that area. So there will be a lot of pragmatic joint economic projects taking place in that area in the near future.
Personally, I think that is the best options available to the countries in the region. When they discuss about the political things, there must be a conflict. It's quite difficult for us to any progress in the discussion about political issues. But when they discuss about economic issues, definitely it can be a win-win games for everybody. So the one thing left to have such a kind of synergy effects in the relationship, the countries in the world, in the region, that is change of North Korean policy. So that's the reason there must be invisible pressures given from the Russian side and Chinese side, but officially they deny to give such a kind of pressure on North Korean side.
I'm afraid I have to also add to this discussion that South Korea has not been on board. It has not been part of this joint development.
Yes, that's the point. So the South Korean government, in fact, over the last several years, as far as I know, they have emphasized that we should be on board. But I think to secure such a kind of ticket, we have to strengthen the relationship with the USA in some sense, or Japan. But I think the question is how much we will go in the relationship with the Japan and USA, not hurting the sentiment of the Chinese government and Russian government can have in dealing with this issue.
Now, recently we saw the Russian Border Patrol open fire on a North Korean fishing vessel, causing multiple casualties and the death of one crew member. What do we make of that?
That means that Russia do not weigh a high value on North Korea as a strategic partner. We mentioned the potential joint partnership with North Korea to develop the far eastern part of Siberia and the Najin Hassan area, but we have not seen the clear evidence that Russia is really determined to upgrade its strategic partnership with Pyongyang yet. So we have to wait and see. It seems like Russia's focus remains on China.
All right, let's move on to business news. Samsung Electronics has officially pulled the plug on its troubled Galaxy Note 7 less than 2 months after its official launch. We'll look at the run-up to this final decision and discuss how Samsung might move past this debacle.
Packed with impressive features such as iris recognition and water resistance, Samsung Electronics' Galaxy Note 7 smartphone was unveiled in August, with many praising it for innovation. But the glory was short-lived as reports of batteries catching fire began to surface. In the end, Samsung Electronics decided to permanently discontinue production, killing off the Note 7 model.
고객의 안전을 최우선으로 고려해서 이런 결정을 내리게 됐습니다. 교환과 환불 과정에서 사용자분들의 불편이 최소화될 수 있도록 준비에 만전을 기하겠습니다. 큰 불편과 심려를 끼쳐드린 점 깊이 사과드립니다.
On the back of its strong emphasis on features and functionality over the years, Samsung had risen to become an industry leader in the global market. This is what helped it land 7th on Interbrand's Best Global Brands this year, with its brand value surpassing an estimated $50 billion for the first time. The Note 7 debacle, however, received attention worldwide with no shortage of headlines surfacing in the media. Despite great concerns, Samsung shares, which had temporarily nosedived, began to recover due to purchases from foreign investors. This is seen as a nod of approval towards the company's brand image and its efforts to keep its refund and exchange process free of major problems. Galaxy Note users have also shown signs of brand loyalty. Despite reports of batteries catching fire, a survey conducted after the incident showed that 60% said they are fans of Galaxy Note products, with 20% saying although they will watch future developments, they will likely continue to use Note products. Samsung, as well as the Korean government, have each launched their own investigations into the cause behind the battery fires and explosions. The question now is how the tech giant can move past the latest crisis and win back consumer trust.
Well, there's been a lot of backlash against the Note 7 failure, especially in the US.
Samsung Electronics was in the wrong place in the wrong time. We are all very well aware of the similar incidents in the past in the US automobile market that
With Toyota.
Toyota, Lexus, ES350 were recalled because of the problem with sudden engine activation, acceleration. But later it was discovered that there was a structural problem with the brake system. And the critical blow to US customers was that the second recall or the cancellation of the product after the Samsung announced a sweeping decision to exchange the first Galaxy Note 7.
Yeah.
Then the assumption was that Samsung was really on the top of the issue. But those exchange Galaxy Note 7 became overheated as well and experienced explosions. So that was a turning point that credibility of the Samsung was totally lost in the US market.
Well, the Note 7 crisis will no doubt be an opportunity for some of the other smartphone makers, including Apple.
There are two different opinions about the benefits which the Apple can gain from the failure of the Galaxy Note 7 in the market. Yes, Apple will gain huge benefits. The damages which Samsung will have from the failure of the Note 7 in the market, Galaxy Note 7 in the market, would be about 4 trillion won, including the transaction, the costs, for the exchange of, recall. The Apple and the Samsung have shared the premium mobile phone market in the world. By Samsung failed to sell the Galaxy Note 7 in the market, definitely we can easily say the Apple will gain more market share in the premium mobile phone devices market. But the another opinion is this, not that much, because there must be some differences in software, using software between Apple and the Galaxy, Samsung Galaxy Note 7. The Android system is used by Samsung, but while the iOS system is used by the Apple. Those who purchased the Samsung Galaxy Note 7, of course, some of them bought the devices because they liked Samsung products, but someone also liked the operating software, Android system. So despite of the failure of the Galaxy Note 7 in the market, they will not change their devices immediately from Samsung made one to Apple. They will wait for the another Samsung devices which are using the Android system.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see how much of a loss Samsung suffers as a result and whether Apple does benefit from Samsung's crisis.
Wait, yes.
But don't you think Samsung was quick enough with its actions, from the global recall to the decision to stop production altogether? Shouldn't that help regain some of the consumer trust in the long run?
As I said, that the quick decision to recall the first line of Galaxy Note 7 was a right decision to maintain the customers' trust in Samsung products. But the problem was the second failure, the explosion of the new Galaxy Note 7 provided in exchange with the previous ones. But I personally think that Samsung will rise again because Apple, its chief rival, also has similar experiences,
Right.
at least twice. One was in 2007 when Steve Jobs proudly introduced the first generation of iPhone, which was priced at $599. And after it sold 8 gigabyte iPhone for the 2 months, it lowered the price by $200 to $399, which was met by huge uproar and protests by the loyal, iPhone, customers who had already bought the first line of the products. So Steve Jobs wrote the letter to Wall Street Journal and apologized for the
Yes.
decision of lowering the price and provided a $100 coupon for the customers who had bought the iPhones. And the second one was the so-called antenna gates, that when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone 4, then some customer discovered that if you hold the iPhone 4 with the fingers mostly on the lower left
Right.
corner, the antenna power suddenly declined.
Right.
And Steve Jobs initially totally dismissed the process and if you have a problem, just hold it in a different way. That was his reply. But later he apologized and exchanged and recalled the products. And Apple just remained one of the most attractive items. And according to the business analysis, only 1.7% of customers have actually requested a refund for the iPhone 4 with the antenna problem. And only 0.55% of buyers have called Apple company to actually complain. So if Apple succeeded in overcoming these two major crises, then why not Samsung?
Why not, indeed? So what do you think Samsung should do to overcome this crisis and get back on its feet?
Well, Samsung must make every effort to regain consumers' trust. I think that will be the most important thing Samsung should have to take care of. Well, many business analysts insist that Samsung make every effort to make the victims of this case be a super consumer. That means that Samsung should consider reviewed what the Apple did when they had the similar difficulties. Well, even someone said that why not Samsung give some about $1,000 coupon to the victims. Well, these days when someone who have the Galaxy Note 7 at the airport, there is the announcement at the airport, you should not bring the Galaxy 7
Can't take
with
it
you.
on board, right?
And it's they feel shame because simply because they have Galaxy 7. But they said that, oh, well, anyone who purchased Galaxy 7 will get the such a kind of compensation, A, B, C, D. Then they just proudly show that I have Galaxy 7 and such kind of thing. So, I mean, it's kind of course, this is one strategy introduced by one business analyst. But Samsung should make every effort to regain consumers' trust.
Well, we do have to wrap up our discussion. Your final thoughts of the week, Professor Shin?
Yes, I think the North Korea must, make a very wise decision, particularly, as I discussed before several weeks ago, the future of the Korea as well as the reason of peace can be directly affected by the decision of North Korea. So I wish North Korean government reconsider the situation and make change as possible as they can.
Dr. Bong?
I'd like to comment on the Samsung incident. Even Steve Jobs said once, quote, "This is life in the smartphone world. Phones are not supposed to be perfect." Even the mastermind of the Apple iPhone admits that the road to better products in the smartphone market is not a smooth one, but bumpy and hard one. So as long as a Samsung company will make the entire process of figuring out the real problem of the Galaxy Note 7, the battery or the heat, then it will soon gain the trust of the customers. Important part, homework for the Samsung is to invite the customer's participation in figuring out the issue.
Transparency.
Transparency.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. That is all for this edition of News Inside. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more next week.